I thank you for being here this evening. We have joined the craft for many reasons. Its philosophy, its history, for brotherhood. And hopefully your experience has been fulfilling, enlightening, and meaningful. Without brothers ready, willing, and able to take on leadership roles and the knowledge and skill to address the challenges that every lodge faces, however, we are doomed. Indeed, we are living in ever complex times with more rules, regulations, and laws that call upon our brothers to not only be master masons, but accountants, plumbers, and property managers. So I'm grateful to you that you care enough to learn about options that just might save your lodge thousands of dollars or protect and preserve its assets. I'm grateful for our speakers, Right Worshipful Al Bryant and Right Worshipful Robert Valenta, for taking the time to be with us once again. Brother Al is the longstanding chairman of the Grand Lodge Building and Lodges Committee, as well as a past Grand High Priest, who I was honored to serve as Judge Advocate, past District Deputy Grand Master, and a whole host of other titles. Brother Bob is also a past District Deputy Grand Master, past Chairman of the Grand Lodge Insurance Committee, past member of the Grand Lodge Lodges and Buildings Committee, and he's a founder and owner of Valenta & Company Insurance, that was established in 1990. I present the first part of tonight's program, Historical Society Status, 501c3s, and other options for property tax exemptions, challenges, benefits, and pitfalls. Brother Al.
Thank you, Steve. Since I did this a couple of months ago, I'll make it relatively brief. I wanted to start with a comment on Mike Siegel's presentation couple of weeks ago. He mentioned that when we formed our historical society, we had to apply for property tax exemption 6 times. This was not because we didn't know what we were doing. It was because you have to work with your assessor. New York State is home ruled, which means that each assessor, city, town, village, they have the final say as to what will happen with your property. So it's the assessor that you really need to know. I'm going to run through 3 501c3 ideas that some of the lodges are using in this jurisdiction, from the easiest to the hardest. The first is the Masonic War Veterans Post. This was approved by the U.S. Congress. Used to be certain years, you had to be a veteran during certain particular years, but now all veterans are accessible. So once your building is owned by a Masonic War Veterans Post, you have the possibility of tax exemption. And the reason I say possibility, once again, it's the assessor that makes that determination. It's very easy to get started. It costs about $150 for a charter, and you just need whatever the requirement is and the number of veterans to get going. The second area is charitable associations. Now, there are quite a few upstate. This will require an attorney to draw up the paperwork. It's not that expensive, but when you get started, you have to understand that a portion of your income has to be donated to another charity. Now, by charity, if you give to a widow or you give a food basket at Thanksgiving, that's not a charity. A charity is another 501c3. So you'd have to be given to the Masonic Medical Research Institute or the Red Cross or some other organization of that character. Okay, so that's the charitable association. And then the final one is the Historical Society. My own lodge went through that. It's a costly enterprise, about $25,000. But when you're paying $15,000 or $20,000 a year in property taxes, you know, in a couple of years, you're A-okay. Um, with a historical society, you have to be open for 1,000 hours a year, um, just for the historical society, not for lodge meetings, not for other meetings, but just for the historical society. It's open to the public, and it's a relatively easy thing to do, but it requires a little work. All of these um, situations require work. Now, once you form a 501c3 and you have your EIN from the IRS, in order to get property tax exemption, you have to file a RP 420AB, RP for real property 420AB. There are two forms. One is for building use and one is for the organization itself. Let me just make it kind of clear that about 90% of the building usage has got to be for this 501c3 and not for the lodge and not for the Eastern Star, the Royal Arch, or the Cryptic, but for the 501c3. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind when you apply for tax exemption. Now, in most of the state, the date is March the 1st. You have one day to file. They'll let you know sometime in July whether or not you're accepted for part or full tax exemption. Um, and that's for the following year. So if you don't make it this year, you have to refile in the following March. Now, the important thing is to know your assessor. Talk to your assessor, see where his motive is. Um, he might be a veteran that fought in Iraq, and the war veterans post might be the best opportunity for you to get tax exemption. So you got to keep that in mind. You have to know your community and you have to know your leaders. The most important thing to consider tonight in anything that I say is whether or not you should own a building. Now, constitutions does not, anywhere in constitutions does not indicate that you have to own a building or that it has to be for strictly Masonic purposes. There are many lodges, meeting and rented spaces in hotels and the like. Uh, to determine whether or not you should own a building, you have to understand that the amount of time that you work on masonry is way more important than the amount of time that you spend on raising money to support your building. If all you do is think about supporting your building, then maybe you ought to think about selling your building and moving to another forum.
Right Worship Brother Al has extended himself, and he will, speak directly with your lodge and address some of these issues. In fact, on his behalf, I reached out to a whole district and offered his services, with his blessing, that is, and he would be happy to discuss with you your lodge's particular circumstances. The most important thing I want everyone to realize is that you shouldn't feel that you're alone, that there are indeed brothers who have worked through these issues. Brother Al, would you maybe talk for a couple of moments about the experience that you actually went through with your own lodge, because you actually know so much about the Historical Society status because you actually walked through that with your lodge over the course of a number of years?
Well, I we filed for the Historical Society in 2006, and it took us. We got our temporary charter in 2006, and then we got our permanent charter in 2013. So, uh, like I mentioned before, we did file for tax exemption 6 different years in a row before we finally got the assessor to agree with our um, recommendation that we should be tax exempt. Uh, it's not really an easy process. It's a long, difficult process, and you have to have brothers that are interested in not only expending the time expending the finances, and everything else that's required to make it happen. Um, but we've been very successful. We just had our annual meeting um, the other night, and I was voted out after 28 years on the board of trustees. But I'm kind of glad for that. But it's been fun. It's a lot of work. Okay, we go through normally a regular annual meeting. We go through. We have guest speakers, and we publish a brochure that's put out. Anybody that's interested in seeing that brochure, we're glad to send it to you. I just want to make sure that everybody understands. You know, everybody's worried about tax exemption. Taxes are about 30% of the cost of running your building. Now, the lodge that I spoke to in Long Island the other day, uh, they're running about 45% with their taxes. So that's an unusual circumstance. So being tax exempt would be of great help. If you're upstate New York and your taxes are $2,500 a year, uh, might not be worth the aggravation and the time involved in putting that program together, whatever program you choose. So um, somebody just said theirs is over 50%. Wow.
Wow.
10. Well, your building only costs $20,000 a year to run. That doesn't sound right, but because buildings nowadays cost. Yeah, somebody said in Oklahoma. I think in Texas also they're exempt, but that's different because it's controlled by the state. Okay, in New York, it's not controlled by the state. It's controlled by every municipality. So,
Brother Al, I'm going to start calling on some brothers. The first brother I'm calling upon is Michael Laraka.
Hey, brothers, thank you so much for this. I'm the president of the Valley Masonic Historical Society. We talked several months ago, Brother Allen, and I had a conversation via email with the Nassau County Department of Assessment, and they came back to me and told me that Nassau County does not grant real property exemptions for fraternal organizations. So I don't know what to do at this point, because it seems like, how do I honestly, and that's the only way to do it, position if we do switch the deed into the Valley Masonic Historical Society and apply? It seems like a waste of time, because I don't know how to divorce what we do from being a fraternal organization. Is the general status of historical society kind of cleanse us of being fraternal in a way, or am I just spinning wheels?
well,
Any ideas?
that really depends on you, okay? Because if you can show, and I'd be glad to email you the way we broke it down, but if you can show that your building is used 90% of the time for the historical society and only 10% for the other stuff, then you're no longer a fraternal organization, you're a historical society. And keep in mind that any historical society uh, is open to the public. So your trustees can be members of the public who do not belong to your historical society. And you have to keep that in mind when you present it to the lodge. Because a lot of lodges are afraid to do this because they're also afraid that, well, you know, if you get people from the outside, then they're going to say the lodge can't meet in the building. But I know exactly what you're saying, and that's a general rule in New York State. They will not give exemption to fraternal organizations, but as a historical society, you have a way better chance.
I'm going to call right now on worshipful brother Walter Zelaya.
Good evening, brothers. My question in regards to the different um, organizations, the C's, which one? Why does it cost so much to do the historical society, and does it take longer? It seems
it takes longer, and the attorney's fees are much higher, and you have to file with the state. You have to be approved by the state. I mean, it's a long, drawn-out process. And then, like I said, it took us, 7 years to get our permanent charter. having a permanent charter means that that they can't take your charter away unless you do something that's illegal. And most lodges will not turn over the building until the Historical Society has a permanent charter, because if you have a temporary charter and you lose your charter, the building goes to the state. Okay. So it is a very expensive proposition.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to call on Right Worshipful Brother Richard Newton.
Yeah, greetings, brothers. Yeah, I guess, yeah, our lodge, we don't have a whole lot of expenses. Our taxes are one of the biggest ones, but our biggest problem has been, you know, with membership where it is, trying to get that money up there for that property taxes along with the other expenses has just been driving us downward every year. As far as the charitable association, is there a certain portion that would have to go of the income towards the 501c3, or I mean, is there a certain percentage of it, or is it the greater percentage, the more likely your chance?
Well, I don't know if the greater percentage increases your chances, but once you become a charitable association, you can only be negative for 2 years. Okay. So you have to then donate to other 501c3s. Okay. What the percentage is, I'm not really sure of at this point, because I think that has changed recently, but it's easy to find out. Just go onto the state website.
I'm going to call right now Brother Brian Moore.
We're wrestling with this as a trustee, not only in our lodge, we ended up being part of the Masonic Association of Utica, but that's also host to many other lodges. And we have certainly many floors and many historical relics, but the 90% number scares me. I've looked at the library we have, and we submit many artifacts, but it's opening it up and providing that access, especially during this last year. So we're actively wrestling with this problem. So I just wanted to, you know, pick brains and learn what I could here tonight. So I'm hopefully I can learn some more. But the one question I had, I think you answered, that 90% of the use has to be for the Historical Society. And that could be a challenge, looking at the number of organizations we have using the building. There's 12, 2 youth groups, and then 10 other bodies, four or 5 lodges, and then, you know, Templar, Commandery, that kind of thing. So I guess I just hoping to learn and pick your brains. Certainly taxes are a big thing. We are actually looking at the Historical Society National Registry. That was in process at one point. I think it's been kind of curtailed here. So we got our Masonic Association meeting tomorrow. I'm hoping to find a little more about that. So without dragging out anymore, I'll turn it back over. Thanks.
Well, I want to just mention that the Utica Temple, the Albany Temple, those are ideal temples for historical societies. I mean, and when you think about it, 1,000 hours a year, which is 20 hours a week,
Yep.
That's not really that difficult to make happen. So my lodge is a relatively small lodge in upstate New York. We're just south of Lake George. We're north of Albany. But we can do it easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, since you're meeting in a historical building, your building obviously is a historical building, okay? Like our building is a historical building. When we do our annual communication with the state, we include all our meeting times because we're meeting in a historical building. I mean, it's only logical. Might not be, you know, normal person's logic, but to me, it's logical. Okay. So it really isn't that difficult once you put it in play.
I guess I'd like to pick your brain some more. I'm sorry. I was going to pick your brain some more, and I think I got my email on here. I'll throw that in there anyway. So
okay.
Talk some more about that offline if that's possible.
That's fine.
And Brother Al actually has been kind enough. We will list his email address and contact information on our site, so that for brothers that are not taking it down now, if you go to Craftsman Online, you can check that out. I want to just follow up, Brother Al, with something you said about the cost. And actually, this is coming from Brother Terry Macaroni, who I know, you know, is on Long Island, and they have very high taxes on there. And did you say that the cost for your lodge to convert to a historical society was about $25,000-$30,000?
It was 25,000. It actually cost us 15,000 to get started. We used a Masonic attorney. I'm not going to mention any names. And it wasn't you, but we used a Masonic attorney, and we went around in circles and circles and circles. Then we hired a local attorney who was familiar with working with the town. And to make a long story short, he cost us 10 grand. So it cost us 25 grand. We don't really mind because our taxes were 17,000. Okay. So, and it's since then it's paid for itself easily.
So would it be fair to say that if you went to that second lawyer first, you would only cost you $10,000?
Probably, yeah, you're right.
Okay, so only because I think that some brothers were probably very scared when you start to mention some of those numbers. And just for the record, the E is silent on Terry Macarone. Okay. The next speaker, the next question we have is from Brother Bo.
Good evening, brothers. Thanks for taking my question. I am from Arizona Lodge number 2 in Phoenix, Arizona, and we are lucky to have a rule in Arizona that most fraternal organizations qualify for tax exemption. We just have to reapply for it every year, which is great. But we've been looking at a way that we can get a 501c3 for 2 reasons. 1, so that brothers could donate to it, obviously, and 2, so that we could qualify for some matching grants and start applying for those kinds of grants. And I understand the Grand Lodge of Iowa, they have it set up where I think the Grand Lodge owns the building and they have a separate 501c3 that kind of manages or provides grants to the building to do work. I had heard that once you get on the National Historic Register, that would automatically qualify you as a 501c3. Do you know if that's true?
No, that's not. It's not true. I know that you're entitled to a percentage of tax exemption. And I know it's going to work differently in your area than our area, but we still have to apply for it. And we have to refile every year on March the 1st to reinstate our tax exemption. By the way, your fan looks great. I can't see your head. I see your fan.
I must have been up, it tilted away.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay, so it's basically the same, except that we have to apply for the initial tax exemption with the RP 420AB. So,
Brother Al, can I ask you a question? Do you know much about 501c2s? I've been speaking with a brother from the Albany area who actually applied successfully for 501c2 status, which is it's an exclusive purpose of holding title to property and collecting income from that property. Have you worked with any lodges that have done that and been successful with it?
Well, I did a presentation a couple of years back at Saratoga, and they went against my there's a whole bunch of 501c whatever, like 15 or 16 of them, whatever, and they're all tax exempt for certain things. Lodges are 501c10s, which are tax exempt for dues and donations. 501c3 are tax exempts for income and that sort. So a 501c2 is tax exempt for income through holdings, okay, rentals or whatever they do. I think that you can apply in any one of the 501c's, okay, but you're more likely to get a tax exemption with a 3. I know they tried to do that. They became a 501c2. They ended up selling their building because they couldn't get tax exemption and they couldn't make ends meet. So
I would like to call on Right Worshipful Brother Stuart Card, who has a question. Brother Stu.
Hi, Al, and hi, brothers.
Hi, Stu.
The 90%, I'm wondering if you can tell me how that is measured. Is it in terms of square footage or in terms of hours of usage during the year, or what's the magic formula?
It's hours of usage during the year. So if you're open 1,000 hours for the Historical Society and you have one lodge that meets there once or twice a year, obviously the Historical Society is going to meet a lot more in the building than the lodge meets. It's based on hours of the year.
Thank you.
Brother Al, if I just I'm going to raise a question that was raised by Brother Brother Richard Newton with respect to the policy of Grand Lodge. And do you have any sense of, I guess the question really is there a concern with, establishing any of these 501c somethings and then potentially taking it out of the ambit of the Benevolent Orders Law, and therefore, in some respects, under the domain of the Grand Lodge of New York, or even if it's the trustees and not the fraternal wing headed by the Grand Master? Have you ever had any conversations, Brother Al, with respect to any of the official position of our Grand Lodge on that end?
I've had a number of discussions with various Grand Masters about this topic. Grand Lodge doesn't want your building, okay? They're not a real estate agent. They don't want to have your building and have to deal with it. So if you become a charitable association, or if you become a historical society, that takes you out of the Grand Lodge umbrella, okay? So you're no longer, you're no longer, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm old. You're no longer under their umbrella. Okay. So you're on your own. That's the same as there are so many lodge associations that were formed before Benevolent Orders Law. Okay. And they have the same situation. We have one like in Messina. I mean, the building is owned by the chapter, the council, and the lodge. Okay, but they were formed in the 1890s, so they are not under the Benevolent Orders Law. Okay, the same with the original association that owned Queensbury, was formed in 1895. They were not under the Benevolent Orders Law. So I don't know that that gives you any special protection other than protecting the trustees.
And just to follow up with what Brother Al said, and that is, brothers sometimes get confused between the trustees, which is the charitable wing of our Grand Lodge, and the fraternal wing that is, in a sense, headed by the Grand Master. When lodges, for example, lose their charter and therefore lose their assets, that the building and the assets, or just the assets, regardless of whether there's a building or not, does not go to the fraternal wing. It doesn't go to the Grand Master. That goes to the charitable wing of our institution, which are the trustees, the Masonic Hall and the Solemn Fund, for charitable purposes. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that to follow up on Brother Al's comments. For those of you that are not aware, and we have been talking about this in the last several years, the Benevolent Orders Law, I believe, and Brother Al will correct me if I'm wrong, I think in 1910, it was established to permit lodges to purchase properties, and it does afford other types of protections for officers, such as not being personally liable for negligence that occurs on your property. But once again, I think that Grand Lodge has in many respects always stayed away from dealing with lodge issues because it really is the responsibility of the lodges themselves. I think what we're trying to do now is just realize that we all could use some help in talking through these issues and looking for answers that we all are really seeking to find.
Yeah, I have, before you go on, I do have a podcast on YouTube on the Benevolent Orders Law and some of the protections. So I know exactly what you're saying. It protects the trustees if they make a bad investment, whatever. Okay, next question. Oh, there was an interesting question that popped up. Richard Friends, I think, and he asked if you can sell the building once you're a historical society. And absolutely, yes, you can sell the building. You can do whatever you need to do. It's a little bit different with a charitable association. You got to get permission from the state.
I'm going to call on Right Worshipful Brother Ponytail right now. Has his hand up and his hair in a bun.
Good evening, brothers. It's Robert Remington from Robert Grata Daystar Lodge number 647. I think some of this was already answered because I was going to ask questions about the 501c2 and in relation when it says that step that you can give to a 501c3, does that include, say, like our say like Camp and Charities Fund, for instance, if that would be a viable 501c3 to give to, or does it have to be a non-Masonic 501c3 if you are Masonically connected with the 501c2?
No, if you can give to the Medical Research Institute, okay, that's the best 501c3 I can think of. But yeah, you can give to other, as long as they're 501c3s, you can give to other Masonic charities. You can give to other charitable associations. So, or you could give to My Historical Society. That would work.
I think that's a worthy cause.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, you know, I gotta say, I put down on, I don't use Facebook anymore because of the political climate, but for my birthday, I put down, my birthday wish was $500 from Facebook. We ended up raising $2,500, so that was good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your answer, and I think that it is a worthy cause. I'm going to call Brother Dick Johnson. Brother Dick.
Good evening, Right Worshipful. I'm a past Deputy Grand Master from the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, and I'm the chairman of the Masonic Building Association for the Grand Lodge. There is some issues with lodges and building associations being accepted as 501c3s by the IRS. I know that each state has different qualifications and requirements, but the IRS is the ultimate deciding authority on whether you become a 501c3 or 501c10. 501c10 fits most lodges under the rules established by the IRS. The IRS has a test criteria which defines a 501c3 organization. And if I could have probably 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like to read that test criteria. It may answer a lot of questions.
Please do, brother.
Okay. Under the section of 501c3, the IRS criteria is as follows. The entity to be organized exclusively for a charitable purpose. The organization must be a corporation or unincorporated association, a community chest, a fund, or a foundation. A charitable trust is a fund or foundation and will qualify. The organizing documents must limit the organization's purposes to exempt purposes in section 501c3 and must not expressly empower it to engage other than as an insubstantial part of its activities in activities that are not a furtherance of one or more of those purposes. This requirement may be met if the purposes stating in the organizing documents are limited by reference to section 501c3. In addition, an organization's assets must be permanently dedicated to exempt purposes. This means that if an organization dissolves, that assets must be distributed for an exempt purpose to the federal government or to a state or local government for a public purpose. To establish that an organization's assets will be permanently dedicated to an exempt purpose, its organizing documents should contain a provision ensuring that their distribution for an exempt purpose in the event of dissolution. If a specific organization is designated to receive the organization's assets upon dissolution, the organizing document must state that the named organization must be a 501c3 organization when the assets are distributed. Although reliance may in some cases be placed upon state law to establish permanent dedication of assets for exempt purposes, an organization's application can be processed by the IRS more rapidly if its organizing documents include a provision ensuring permanent dedication of its assets for exempt purposes. So,
You know, I understand what you're saying, but our lodges are not applying for a 501c3. They're 501c10 in New York. What we're doing is saying you can create these other entities that fall under that category. Now, one of the things you mentioned is very important, and that is that if the organization ceases to exist, that the assets have to go to a certain place. In our particular case, we advise our lodges to put a reversion clause in their deed, which indicates that if they go out of business, instead of the building going to the state, it goes back to the original ownership, whether it be a trustee association or a lodge. Okay, so that's one of the ways we kind of skirt around that issue.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Theoretically, it's supposed to go to the state.
yeah, or another 501c3.
Yeah.
There is an acid test that the IRS has done several times over the years where 501c3 holding title to a building decides that they're going to go out of business. They're going to sell it to John Henry for a buck. Well, can't do that because he's not, if you're a 501c3, it has to be sold to a 501c3, and it has to be predicated upon reasonable market value. You can't sell it for less than what you have into it as far as acquisition or equity, and you're going to end up getting in serious trouble if you don't follow the IRS rules.
Yeah, but if you have a reversion clause in your deed, okay, you're not breaking the IRS rules.
That's correct. You know, as long as they're also 501c3.
Well, they're not a 501c3, but it doesn't matter. Well, actually, ours is, but others are not. But
yeah,
but just to say. But no, thank you for that information.
Okay.
I have there's a couple of guys putting websites and stuff, Cornell and stuff up there. You know, I'm only doing this based on, I don't know how many years I've been the chairman of lodges and buildings, probably 10 or so, but I'm only doing it based on my experience. So
before I get to the next question, Brother Al, I just want to just address something that Brother Randy Meshut has sent in, and that was, does the Benevolent Orders Law also protect Masonic district associations? Do you know the answer to that, Brother Al?
Yeah, it does, as long as they're formed after the 1907 BVL date. Okay, if they're formed before, then it's not protected by BVL. If they're formed after, like one that's formed this month, they're protected by Benevolent Orders Law.
As a side note, I remember years ago when I was on the proctor and then the judge advocate, I actually used to try to do some research. There's not that much case law on the Benevolent Orders Law because there's not many cases that occur because of issues in the law, because it's just dealing with fraternal organizations. So sometimes it's challenging to find answers for sometimes these questions because there's not that much information out there other than the law itself and maybe its historical intent. Let me go to right worshipful Brother Glenn Rubin. No relation, but he is my brother. Brother Glenn.
Good evening, Right Worshipful Grand Treasurer. I would like to ask a question, and I'm sorry if I put anybody on the spot. I don't mean to, but every time I hear of another state that is has made their fraternal organizations tax exempt, my mouth kind of waters at that. And I know that years ago, there was a push in New York State to try to make the constituent lodges of Grand Lodge and the other fraternal organizations chapters tax exempt, and it didn't go anywhere. But it's been a good number of years, and I'm just wondering if the time might be right with the current legislature to try it again, to have some renowned leaders from our Grand Lodge and perhaps some other fraternal organizations around the state as a vanguard, contact some of our leaders in Albany and try it once again and see if perhaps we can get some kind of relief, especially because of the pandemic that we've just been through. Unfortunately, if a lot of our lodges fail, those are lodges that prop up Grand Lodge. And that would not be good for Grand Lodge. It seems to me it would be in everybody's best interest to at least open up dialogue in Albany and see if we can get some kind of tax relief for fraternal organizations in New York State.
Well, I want you to look from the other side of the coin, okay? The fact is that fraternal organizations are paying tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in property taxes, okay? It's not something that they want to lose. I mean, theoretically, we should be tax exempt because we do a lot of, we do a lot of charitable stuff. But realistically, from their perspective, they don't want to lose that income. I mean, the state is losing money as it is. Imagine losing the money from taxes from lodges. So I agree with you, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Brother Glenn, I think that I think that your thoughts and your notions are wonderful. I think it's going to take, maybe that's a conversation that we have in our Grand Lodge, and then ultimately get the blessing from our Grand Master to obviously make those sorts of moves. But obviously, it'd be wonderful if it happened. But I fear that which Brother Al's comments are probably more attuned to what the realities of the present day situation. As it is, we're talking about this process of converting to some other entities that will give us tax exempt status, and we can tell that there's a fight even just to make an individual lodge tax exempt, let alone the entire body. But great thought, great idea, and maybe it's a fight for another day. I believe that Brother Randy Meshut has another question. Brother Randy, you're on.
I do, Right Worshipful. Thank you. I'm not sure who this would be addressed to, but we've run into a situation in my area. I'm the senior warden of Schoharie Valley Lodge, but I'm also the president of the district association now. And we had a lodge surrender its charter about 6 years ago now in my district, actually before I was even a Mason. And we've come to, I was presented with a situation by my district deputy that he gave me the tax bill for the property. And I kind of laughed and said, well, that's nice. You can have that. And I come to find out that the district association has been paying the tax bill on this lodge property for the past 6 years. I was confused by that. I asked why, and was informed that actually the trust, in their opinion, the trustees of the lodge are still the owners of the property. And that's also causing some problem because the district has been trying to, or the district deputy has been trying to sell the property for $1. So if anybody wants a nice property in upstate New York for $1, please give me a call. The trustees of this lodge are elderly. My lodge has actually conducted 3 Masonic funerals in the past year for 3 of them. And we don't even know if there's any still alive. And so in order to find somebody who is still alive and cognizant and capable of signing a document and is listed as one of their trustees, huge mess. Have any of you ever had an experience with this, or is it true trustees of the lodge that still own the building and the property and are therefore responsible for it? And also, is the district association responsible for paying the property and school taxes on it? Sorry if I'm stirring up a whole ball of bees with this one.
Well,
Al?
theoretically, your best bet is to find somebody who can sign the document because the trustees still own the building. Is the district association responsible for paying for the upkeep of the building? I would say no, but then again, they don't want a Masonic building to go down the toilet. So your best bet is to get rid of that building, find a trustee, let them sign on the bottom line, give it to a library, give it to whatever, and get rid of it. See, that's what I said in the beginning. Grand Lodge doesn't want your buildings. So even though they turned in their charter, okay, they turned it into Grand Lodge, I'm assuming.
They did.
Grand Lodge doesn't want the buildings. They can't deal with 600 buildings all over the state.
No, actually, nobody wants the building. Unfortunately, it's God's on his way of taking it down. It's in a terrible shape of disrepair, and it's going to be collapsing soon.
Brother Randy, I would just suggest maybe reaching out to, if not Al, myself, not that we necessarily have the answers, but clearly no one wants a Masonic building in our jurisdiction or any jurisdiction, crumbling within the town. It's not very good advertisement for the craft. So let's just, maybe we have to address it and try to find some solutions. I don't know if we're going to find them tonight, but reach out to us and we'll try to see if we can try to work through this issue, because it's certainly an issue that needs to be addressed. Okay.
Thank you.
My brothers, I'm very impressed with all of your questions, and I stated a number of times this evening, this program and all programs will be uploaded to craftsmanonline.com. That's craftsmen, we're plural, men.online.com. Visit the site for this past program, as well as all wonderful past programs, as well as articles written by your brothers about our brothers and our lodges and our shared Masonic story. God bless you. God bless our country, and God bless our craft. Good night, my brothers. Be safe.